Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Circle of the World podcast, where we discuss Joe Abercrombie's First Law series. I am one of your hosts, Lord Chamberlain Jeffrey, and here are my co-hosts,
Archlector George,
and Harrison, the Adeptus Historical.
We continue our coverage of The Heroes, Joe's second standalone, and the next First Law entry. And we cover Still Yesterday, For What We Are About to Receive, and The Riddle of the Ground. So, let's get started. As usual, you know the deal, folks. You know the deal. You know the deal. We want to thank you.
we are indebted.
We are indebted to you. Our loyal fans, our loyal listeners, our loyal friends. Because really, we're all in this together, aren't we? That's a pandemic slogan. But yeah, we do appreciate your consistent support, your friendship, especially in the light of our exile from Reddit. So we appreciate you keeping things going strong. Again, don't forget to, if you want to join a community where we won't get banned, at least, hit us up for the Discord. And, it's been growing. And, join on the fun. Join in. We might have to expand the Discord a little bit, like make different channels eventually, right?
I think it might be that at this point. There's
Yeah,
got to
right.
be some different channels for stuff because people are talking about some weird shit in there, man.
Hey,
Me included.
Hell, yeah, you included. So I think we should, we'll do like First Law specific, then other fantasy stuff, and then general shit maybe. Well, that's what
We gotta do a political one because for whatever reason, our fan base is very political.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
For the most part, or at least politically aware, which there's nothing wrong with that. I think everybody being politically aware is important.
Right.
But
right.
yeah,
And
we don't want
everyone's-
to clog
yeah.
up First Law machine.
And everyone's been pretty well behaved when it comes to politics. There's a rule there.
for the most
No
part.
insulting. No insulting each other or getting into what's the word called back in my day? Flame wars or whatever it's called. We shall ban thee. If not, if you don't listen. Anyway, we'll go ahead and we'll start moving on. But yeah, I just wanted to thank you all for your continued support. And our first segment, as usual, folks, is going to be our community interaction segment. Boys, what are we talking about?
Well, I think it's a little retroactive there because we were just going to talk about the Discord.
Oh, refer to the last segment.
Yeah, refer to the last segment. And what else?
So that's the end of the community interaction segment, guys.
Bravo! We got plenty to cover in the chapters this time. So,
well, don't we have? Shouldn't we just continue to highlight the memeing every chapter?
Yeah, when those pop up, and look it up on House of the Meme Maker. Everybody knows by now probably, but join in and make some more memes. Got some new people on this week, and especially for the meme of the week, so that's good. And as always, just shoot us an email at circleoftheworldpodcast@gmail.com if you want to join the Discord or want to leave some comments or whatever. You can also leave comments on Spotify directly.
Yeah.
So if you want to do that, we'll give them a read in like 3 or 4 weeks' time when we notice them.
Yeah, because we don't get a notification right away, which is I think it's a flaw in Spotify's system, but whatever.
Yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
And yeah, the memeing every chapter, that's like every day, right? It's a free for all.
It's a free for all. So you, so Spaceman, the lead moderator on House of the Meme Maker, will put it up, and there'll be 3 chapters there that you can pick and make a meme from. So
nice. Okay.
Or in fact, I think it's 5 this week. So
5, nice. Love that for him. Love that for us. Yes. Okay, so we'll move on to our first chapter read through, which is Still Yesterday, and we are with our girl Finri. Finri is in a rough spot, I think we could say, right? Still dealing with the ramifications and the fallout of what happened the previous day, right? Where she was it the previous day or 2 days ago?
it was yesterday.
It was yesterday.
Like literally earlier in the day.
Gotcha, right? Because it's still yesterday, clearly. So she's thinking back to the man that she killed, the Issa the Krina bastard. She's thinking about all the the violinist, the Lord Governor Meads, his death, all the chaos that's going on back there. And then she's also kind of thinking about what could have been if maybe the dog man had came a little earlier to notify them about the savages coming across the east, or if Captain Hardrick, had went to get help and came back in due time. She even like envisioned herself being like the hero standing atop of a barricade with a sword, kind of like Monscaro Mercato, like a painting of her she saw somewhere. And then she kind of would get yanked back to reality by a sight, you know.
I got to say, I really like this segment. I love how we almost get more detail of the events in the house than we did at the actual time, because she's going through it in her head and making everything so much more vivid, and you know, the whole bargaining with, oh, I could have done this differently, I could have done that differently. That's like a really good depiction of like a shock reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah. And guilt. And she's riddled with guilt about Elise.
And yeah, especially because she's thinking about if she would have argued harder with Black Dow, she could have demanded that Elise come with her instead. But then, no, I mean, that's really not feasible. I mean, like, let me ask you, do you guys think if she really would have stood her ground and said, no, Elise comes with me or nothing, let's just say she did, would Black Dow have acquiesced?
I don't think so. He would have said, "You're lucky to live with your life." He like Black Dow is diplomatic, and this is as much diplomatic as he could be.
Right, especially because he said it cost him a lot to get Finnery from a stranger.
Yeah, I'm sure if Elise was Black Dow's prisoner, it would have been a different story.
Mm-hmm.
But she's not. Yeah. She's stranger cast, not his prisoner. So
Black Dow would have been like, "Whatever. What can I do with some weak girl? Like whatever." Like, but since it's stranger come knocking.
Right, because Stranger got both of them. That's right. So yeah, I guess. Sorry, Elise. We really hope you somehow.
Anyways, George, I think George, you bring it back to the point. I think this dream depiction, like, just sitting in there, kind of awake, halfway asleep, in this frenzy is depicted really well. Everything quiets down, and she's not having to be up front and talk to people. She has a complete mental breakdown, and for a completely justifiable reason, based on her experiences in her whole life. And I mean, think about this. It honestly reminds me of Shiver's fever dream, where basically it's not just the idea that she went through some traumatic ordeal. It's the idea that her perspective on life has completely changed, and she's got to figure that out. So Shivers obviously figured it out, went down a pretty dark path, and we'll see how Finnery figures out what kind of path she's going to take. So I like how Joe depicts these big moments, because most of his characters change over time, and every now and then he has these moments where it's this critical point for a character where they just like they have to change, otherwise they're just going to sink. So
yeah, no, absolutely, good perspective there, Harrison. That was good. And so she kind of doesn't come back to like a life or anything, but Hal's there. Oh, and I did want to point out something before. Supposedly they have given her a bit of a husk pipe to help with the pain, which is a nice little reappearance of Husk. And I think, in the trilogy we had that. No, it was Shagga, right?
It was mostly Chagga that they spoke about.
Chagga in the north, and then Husk was in Best of Gold.
Right. Okay. And so I want but there isn't like a worry that she'll get addicted here.
So I think it's sort of used like a morphine stand-in. So it's one of those things like if you just have it when you've been told to,
right?
Then it's okay.
Yeah, and then I probably imagine like an army medic gave her the pipe, but then took it right back. He's like, "All right, this is your hit. Get out of here. Go.
Yeah, exactly.
Get away, addict. Get away."
This will help with the pain. Just this once, though.
This is once, and you'll never find out where I store this stuff.
Yeah, this is my personal stash.
Only because your daddy told me I had to give you some. Anyway, so Hal's there. He this is an awkward situation. He comes in to check in on her. It's like right around dawn, right before dawn, and he doesn't know how to behave, and she doesn't know how to behave. He says, "I brought you some fresh clothes." She just thanks him in a very formal manner. He's like, "Sorry to wake you." She goes, "I wasn't asleep." And she's obviously still dealing with the effects of the husk, the ramifications of the events of yesterday. And he tells her that, he thought he should come because her father had put him in charge of the assault on the bridge in Osrong. She doesn't know what to say. She just says, "Will you be leading from the front?" And he's like, "I guess, close enough." She tells him to not indulge in any heroics. He says, "No, don't worry about it. That is just the right thing to do." And then she goes, "Well, it won't help you to get on." And he says he doesn't do it for that reason. He says because someone has to. And Finnery notes how little alike they are, the cynic and the idealist. And she asks, like, why did she marry him?
I like that it's sort of like an echo of what they got in the beginning with the introduction.
Right.
He's the idealist, she's the cynic, and it sort of go back and forth. But now it's got a completely different tone to it. The way that Joe loves to make us suffer.
For real. He kind of goes, Brent, as in Colonel Brent. He says he seems all right under the circumstances. And Finnery says, "Well, how should one feel when one's wife has been taken by the enemy?" And he utterly desperate. He hopes that he will be all right. All right.
To be fair to Hal, Hal did go through this. Not knowing if his wife was going to be alive and all that stuff.
Right.
He just didn't have to go through it the whole time. So whenever he says that, I do think he's speaking from the heart. But obviously, we're in Finnery's perspective, and she's not giving a shit right now.
And it's the last thing she needs to hear as well. It's like, oh, by the way, Brent's he's all fucking easy bits about this,
For real. And he tries to hold her hand, but she shakes it away, and she just says, "You should go." And she turns away from him, and he goes, "All right." Well, he loves her. He says he loves her. She doesn't say anything, and then the door shuts. And that's go ahead.
Totally side note. I hate the way he says "I love you" in the audiobook. I know, and he does it on purpose.
He does, yeah.
He goes,
"I love you."
Yeah, it's really like
you're like.
Blame it on Pacey. Blame it on Pacey.
How would you read it, Jeff? Would you feel like, "I love you"?
I love you.
That's worse.
Way worse.
Wrong. I love you. I love you. I love you.
You got the essence of it there, I think. Until that last bit of it.
So after Hal leaves, Finnery kind of changes her clothes a little bit, puts on like a cloak or something, and then she opens the door, goes through, and because where her room is adjacent to the headquarters. I believe her dad gave her a spare room in the meantime, and he's there, and he's awkward. He's awkward in terms of like knowing how to deal with her. He goes, "Oh, you're awake. How do you feel? How do you feel?" And she says, she's feeling well. And then she said she killed the man yesterday. And he goes, "Oh, well, it might feel that way." But, and she goes, No.
I literally killed a man yesterday.
I stabbed him in the face with a short steel I took from an officer. I put the blade into his face. So I guess I got one. He's like, "Okay, Finnery." She just kind of like laughs and goes, "Am I going crazy? Am I nuts?" Is like things could be much worse, and I should be glad. But there was nothing I could do. What could she have done? And he tries to assuage her, right? He tells her that.
Yeah, I feel like just like Troy is he's a good father, but due to the times and what kind of man he is not equipped to deal with this kind of thing. He is kind of like,
he's like, emotions. This is not regulation.
He's like, "Oh, Finnery, my dear, let me comfort you." But he knows her better than Hal, and he knows that like comfort is not going to fix it. So he's just like, "Oh, they're there," basically.
Yeah, awkward pat on the shoulder.
Yeah, awkward pat on the shoulder.
In his defense, how many dads have a daughter that go through something what Finnery just went through?
No. What I mean is, yeah, I mean you're not wrong. I just mean like even for the times, like he is not. He's not emotionally equipped to deal with
right. But he does
situations.
Right, and so he says, "Look, after what you've been through, only a madman would feel normal. So the best thing you could do is just act like if it is just another day, like any other, because really, that's all it is. You gotta keep moving, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, yeah, I see what you mean. That he's kind of, yeah, you know.
I don't mean it's not marks against him. You know, I
Therapy
mean,
didn't exist back then.
yes, exactly right.
Yeah.
He's like,
He's like, ooh, yikes. Yeah. So,
But like you say, like just the fact that he doesn't just go, oh, whatever. I've been through worse. My men have been through worse, and blah blah blah.
and he doesn't also say, I love you.
right, he's not dismissive. Yeah, he's not overbearing, or not. I don't say
Yes.
overbearing, but overloading with love.
Yeah.
So then she's like, yeah, sure, it's just another day. And then she grabs an apple and she goes outside. And
What she does, I
Mhm.
do like how she does, like, in comparison to how she does expound herself and talk about she killed somebody, everything like that. Like, I like how that there's a difference there in comparison to Hal, because obviously she's like, Hal, you just don't fucking understand. And with her dad, she finds comfort in him, so she went to get comfort from him, and he kind of did that, but she's not going to really be happy with what anybody says right now, so justifiably. But I just I like that that's a detail in there that, in comparison to how she does have that connection with her father, he's just not really equipped to, help her out the way that she's probably needing,
Yeah, absolutely.
Just one tiny detail as well. I like when she picks up the apple, instead of saying it's half green and half red, he says half green and half blood colored.
Yeah, she couldn't.
Yes, it's good. No, it's really good.
Like literally cannot forget about it for like even a second.
No, you're right. You're right. I bet she tries to eat only from the green side too.
That would be a cool detail.
Yeah, right. So she goes outside with the apple, and she sees a bald man standing on the banks of the river, which is Baez. And she is, well, maybe it could be the after effects of the husk, the sleeplessness, or after everything she's seen yesterday. But the first of the Magi did not seem so terrible. So she just goes, another day's fighting. You must be pleased, Lord Baez. He's just like, okay. And I like how she goes, is it Lord Baez, or is there a better term to address you? Your grace, or your wizardship, or your magicosity? He's like, I try not to stand on ceremony, which is bullshit, because he absolutely.
Well, actually, I argue against that, Jeffrey. He is about appearances, but his actual own personal opinion, he does not really care about that stuff. It's all about he cares about the perception of things, not about the actual stuff. That's why he is. Well, here in a minute, he's.
I reckon Baez would not give a shit what you called him as long as you did what he said.
Yes, that's what I mean. That's
very
what I mean.
True. Very true. He's
also
he's a pragmatist.
And just as in it here, he also says, "Oh, you are very frank" to her, and he says another attribute I've always really liked, which reminds me of Logan. Logan was very frank with him, and he likes that. He likes people who are not, ironically, even though he loves to intimidate people. Baez is always such a human character that he does want that connection. So when people are frank, he feels like they're actually being honest with them, and they're that he can be honest with them back. And that's a cool detail. So I like how that was reinforced here. We get all this villain stuff with Baez in this book, but we are reminded, as always, that he is an evil bastard, but he's also very human, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, very true, very true. She decides to, like you said, she's striking up conversation with him. She even asks, like, how does one become first of the Magi anyway? And so he says, well, I was the first apprentice to Juvens. And he's like, oh, okay. And then she goes, well, why don't you do some high art then instead of making men fight? And he says, well, because it's easier to make men fight. Magic is the art and science of forcing things to behave in ways that are not in their nature. And there's nothing more natural than to men than to fight. And he goes, I hope you are recovered from your ordeal yesterday. She's like, oh, totally fine. Almost forgotten about it. It's just another day. Perhaps it will be. Any other day I would spend feverishly trying to advance my husband's interest and therefore my own. And she smiles. She goes, I am venomously ambitious. And he goes, characteristic I've always found most admirable. And then she goes right to it. She goes, Meade was killed. I dare say you need a new Lord Governor of England. And he's like, he is. But it's complicated because some relative of Meade will no doubt rise and expect to demand the post and all that stuff. But he says it shouldn't be like a hereditary post. But then at the same time, trying to navigate the open council because, you become Lord Governor of England, you become more powerful. And so then one of these cocksuckers on the open council could be a step closer to the throne. It's so difficult to navigate for Baez. And then she goes, well, what about my husband? And he's like, oh, that's when he says the thing about, well, Harrison says, you are very frank. It's like, oh, shit, you up front, lady. And then he says, I'm not sure how much support he could raise for him. His father is one of the most infamous traitors in the history of the Union. But then she says, oh, very true. However, when his lands were seized, his power is snuffed out. And she feels that maybe the nobles, can sense like, oh, if it could happen to Brock, it could happen to us. Like, his power doesn't exist anymore. And restoring his son will play well with open council, asserting the rights of ancient families, but also, the fact that then in this case, His Majesty chooses to reward faithful service, merit, and old-time heroism, since Hal has not, all he's done in the 8 years that have passed has been to just put his head down and just do the work, do the right thing, as Craw would say. And so,
we call that in a modern term hustle culture.
Yeah, exactly. And then, Baez like, interesting. He's like, faithful service, merit, heroism, fine qualities in a soldier. He goes, but a Lord Governor is first a politician. Flexibility, ruthlessness, and an eye for expediency are very important there. How's your husband in those arenas? And she goes, weak, but someone close to him could supply those qualities. He's like, interesting. And then
I like how it's like,
go ahead.
Baez is always, he's like, shopping for a slave. That's what it's like. It's like, he's like, let me pick around. What do you have to offer me as my services? And she's like, oh, well, this is what I have to offer. He's like, you're a good saleswoman. I respect that.
Yeah.
Like, I hate Baez.
And he says that he might even mention it to the close council when they next meet. And she goes, well, I would think it'd be best to make a swift choice. Don't allow the whole thing to kind of like be an issue, like be mired. She thinks that he's the best. Her husband is the best man in the Union. And Baez goes, well, who says I want the best man? Maybe I want a fool and a weakling as Lord Governor of England with a stupid, cowardly wife. Maybe that would be better for everybody. She goes, well, that I cannot offer you, I'm afraid. Here, have an apple. She tosses the apple, making him kind of juggle between his teacup and his hands, and he has to drop the teacup as she walks away smiling. Meanwhile, she's smiling outwardly, but internally, she's thinking about the cheek of, the blue cheeks bulging as she slides the short steel in it. She's still replaying that in her head. So that's the end of that chapter, boys. How do you rate it?
I really like this chapter for Fenry. I feel like like I mentioned earlier, it's like her Shivers chapter, and it highlights her strengths. She's also like, she's trying to. It's all about in her own head how she's going to deal with this experience that she's gone through, and so of course she's just tries to deal with it, and then she tries to get comfort from people. Doesn't really work, so then she distracts herself with something she's good at, which is negotiating and trying to promote her husband to a higher station and all that stuff, and that works out pretty good. But she's also just she's obviously kind of unhinged, because we know inside of her mind. And I think it's portrayed excellently. So I think I'm gonna give it a 7 out of Knuckle, because I really like the way it's written here.
I reckon I'm going to go with the same. And just from what I said before, I love how genuine this reaction from Finry feels. I love how all of her relationships with her father and with Hal and with Baez, as little as it has been so far, has changed so much just from, well, I say just from this one event, but you know what I mean, from this one event.
Yes.
And I just think it's a fantastically written character study. So yeah, I'll go for a 7 as well.
Yeah, I think it's a very good chapter. Any chapter that features like not an in-depth, but a decent length conversation with Baez always improves the chapter, right? Because Baez is just Baez. I will. I know you didn't mean like the unhinged for Finri is like it's she's not really unhinged. She's just suffering right from the after effects.
I don't mean like she's.
Yeah, no, I know you
Yeah.
don't. I'm just saying, yeah. But in case any listeners are like, she's not crazy. I mean, more like she's obviously and still suffering the effects of shock, battle shock.
Yes.
PTSD, you could call it. But yeah, this is a great chapter. You see, she treats Hal because Hal doesn't know how to treat her in this instance, right? We remember a couple chapters before when they reunited. At first, it was a romantic reunion, and then when we saw from their perspective as they were going back to the barn, that it was like very awkward because Hal was shifting between being too not overbearing, but like, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Versus also being like, you shouldn't have been up here. I told you, you should have just stayed back. And then, obviously, so there's that different kind of interaction versus like between her and her dad, which is pretty short, but she doesn't have such a cynical or pessimistic view of her dad as she does of her interaction with Hal.
Yeah.
And then obviously she meets Baez, and at this point she kind of just throws caution to the wind, which is kind of like what you might expect of someone in her current situation. So I will give this a 7 out of 9, making this a trifecta. Our first in a few weeks, I think.
I said a 7 and a knuckle, Jeffrey.
What did I say? I said 7 out of 9 fingers.
Oh, I said 7 and a knuckle.
Oh, well, me and George say 7, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
No trifecta.
Not a trifecta.
No trifecta. Well, fuck off, Harrison. You fucked up.
Maybe next week, folks. Maybe next week.
First. You're the contrary.
Yeah, you're right.
We've got this conversation before. My bad.
It's okay. All right, so we'll move on to our next segment, which is our best meme of the week. Georgie boy, that's you. Take it away.
So this week we have Sunny646 on Reddit. And it's me whenever General Croy shows up in the first trilogy. No, I don't want that. He was a bit of a bastard, wasn't he? And then me when Marshall Croy shows up in the Heroes, and it's Solid Snake saluting from whatever game that's from.
With us.
It's very good. And again, it's not a part of the moving every chapter, but it's Heroes related, which is always good.
Yep. We do. I think we've talked about this, right? We saw that transition. We talked about this either in the beginning of this book or maybe at the end of the Last Argument of Kings when we were like, oh, we see a difference in Croy.
He definitely was changed by those events, for sure.
He's definitely been changed. I can't remember if we talked about it in that when we were covering that episode, especially with the one where after Polder dies and the bit where he's like sort of helping West around when he's dying. Like, I think we might have talked about it then. Well, I can't remember. Mm-hmm. It was like a year ago. Loyal listeners, tell us. When did we talk about Croy? Somebody knows. I bet Will knows.
But I bet something that sticks out to me that I feel like I would have talked about, right, was remember that when in Last Argument of Kings, West and Glockta are having a conversation, but he gets sick and like passes out. And Croy is one of the first people to like run to West and tells them we need the medics, and they shuffle him out the room. And I was like, I'm not saying Croy would have been aloof or dismissive of him earlier, but don't forget that Croy and Polder prior to that and prior to West becoming Lord Marshal and prior to the Battle of Adwa, he didn't necessarily look upon West with any kind of favor.
Yeah, that's very true.
And I think that might have been something I brought up because that still sticks to me. It still sticks with me. You know what I mean? So
absolutely. And Marshall and Croy in general is just a really, really good character. And I love this meme because it is just about his development as a character, which is what Joe is so well known for. Mm-hmm. Like half of these memes are just really clever ways of pointing out somebody's character arcs, which is good. This is what these books are all about. So thank you very much for that, Sunny646.
Thank you for that, Georgie boy. So we'll move on to our next segment, which is our second chapter read through, and this is for what we are about to receive. And we start off with the perspective of our boy Kerndon Crawl. and they're up on the heroes. Him and his crew, Dow's, Carl's, actually just pretty much everyone in the vicinity because they're getting ready for battle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what he does is he gets up on a crate that they have upended. So he gets up on it, and it's his responsibility as the second, I believe, to make a speech, right? To give a speech. Speech. And it's a good one, I think. He talks about how Splitfoot's dead, and now Dow made him his second. And so he says, do what he tells you. That's his job, keeping everyone alive. That's their job, is to do what he has to tell them. And for him, his job is to try to keep everyone alive. Then he talks about how he has to give it, a little rundown of his pedigree. My name's Kernan Craw, and I'm 30 years of named man. I stood second to Rud Three Trees back in the day, the Rock of Ufrith. Held the shield for him when he fought against the Bloody Nine. Then I fought for Bethard, and now Black Dow. Every battle you pricks heard of, I had a part in. So safe to say, you don't need to worry whether I'm up to the task. And then he goes to his next part, which is, I want every man here to do the right thing. It's like, oh, what is this? What's going to happen here? And then he talks about, he's not asking to be, he's not asking them to pat children on the head, give your last crust of bread to a squirrel, or being braver than Scarling Hoodless. He's talking about standing by your chief, standing with your crew, standing with the man beside you, and above all else, talking about not getting yourselves fucking killed.
That is a Three Trees callback, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It is indeed.
Although I imagine that kind of thing is quite familiar. I mean, it's good advice in a battle, just don't get killed.
Yeah. And then funny enough, during his speech, he points at Redbeck. And he's like, look at this guy, Redback. And his eyes are like, and he's like, he did the right thing. Stuck in a house in Nosrung with the Union breaking down his door. Stood with his kind, kept his head, put 4 of the bastards in the mud, and came through alive. If a lad of 17 years can keep the Union out of a shack, I reckon men of your experience can keep the Union off a hill like this one. And then he goes something about like how, since, we all know how rich the Union is, so they'll leave plenty behind once they go running back down that slope. Ha ha. All right, that's all. Find your place, guys. Bye.
I do like how his speech goes though. Like it's like the perfect Northman speech. He knows how to do this. But it is funny how, despite his experience doing this over and over again, how he's still like, I don't know if they're gonna like this speech. I bet they're gonna come after me and kill me now. Like, dude, chill the fuck out. Everyone likes you, bro. Please. Anyways, I just think it's funny.
You can't help but think that maybe that's why Cross lived this long, just because he's that paranoid.
That's probably exactly why. No, you're. I don't doubt that for sure.
Has to be a little paranoid, yeah. Because I mean, the North is a very violent place. We know that. And Wonderful comes up and she's like, nice speech. And he goes, yeah, you reckon? She goes, yeah, not sure about the whole right thing, though. I mean, do you have to say that? And he just shrugs and says, well, someone should. And then we switch over to Colonel Valamir and Tunney. Tunney's perspective over there in the 1st Regiment across the bank. We haven't seen Tunney in a minute, right? And I like how Colonel Valamir, he's like, so you guys might have heard some commotion this morning. That was the sound of a raid by the Northmen. And Tunney kind of mutters to himself or to Yolk. He goes, well, that was the sound of someone fucking up.
Yeah.
There was some confusion on the line. Further fuck-ups. Panic spread in the darkness. And he goes, several more fuck-ups. And then Valamir adds, and the Northmen made off with 2 standards. Everyone's just like, ooh. And then Tunney goes, what the fuck? Even he lacked the words for that. Valamir continues. He says that the standards of the 2nd and the 3rd were captured by the enemy. General Miderick is not happy. And I like how Tunney is like, Miderick wasn't happy at the best of times. The fact that 2 of his Majesty standards were stolen right from under his nose the effect that might have had on him is anyone's guess. He says, probably if you stuck a pin in him right now, he'd explode and take half the valley with him.
I love that he says this though, but he's also simultaneously like clutching onto his standard. He's like,
Yeah.
"God dare they?"
Oh,
He
glad it
also
wasn't
is
me.
like, yeah,
Yeah, we're
I'm
gonna
sure
see.
he's thinking that actually,
Yeah,
George.
Tony-
But we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll find out in due time that Tunney, for all of his flaws and stuff, he takes his job as standard bearer very, very seriously. Um, then Valimir goes on. He goes, well, and to make matters even worse, apparently we were sent orders to attack yesterday afternoon, and they never reached us. And Forrest glares at Tunney, and he's like, "What the fuck do you want me to do? I don't know where Leader Ligon went." So he goes, by the time the next set of orders came, it was dark. So Miderick wants us to make up for it today. So as soon as there's light, the general's going to launch an assault, an overwhelming force. And for the wall at this end, this far western end that they're at, he's going to leave to them, to the 1st Regiment. As soon as they see them leave the wall, then the 1st Regiment is going to cross the river and take them to flank, and that'll be the end. Any questions? And then Tunney had one that came up in his head, which was, what if they don't leave the wall? But he didn't say that out loud.
That would not be good for the morale of the recruits.
Yeah. and then Valimir basically goes, we don't have our horses and we're missing half our men, but that won't stop us. Hey, there's still time for all of us to be heroes. And then Tunney, as they all kind of break up, Tunney goes to Forrest and goes, you hear that? We can all be heroes. And so Forrest is like, yeah. Anyway, I need you to get up to the tree line, keep an watch on the wall. He's like, all right, no problem. And then he goes, look, the instant you see the Northmen start to clear out, you give the signal. And he goes, and Tunney, you're not the only one watching, so don't even think about pulling anything clever. I still remember what happened with the ambush outside Shrikta, or what didn't happen. And then Tunney goes, no evidence of wrongdoing, and I'm quoting the tribunal there. So the fact that he had to quote he had a tribunal, it's crazy. And I like how Forrest goes, you're quoting the tribunal. You're a piece of work.
I love this. I love this sort of rivalry, or
this dynamic they have.
Exactly. I don't think that Forrest actually does think about Tunney as a piece of work. He's just like, man, you're a clever dude. Why the fuck aren't you doing better?
Right. And I think he knows that Tunney is capable of better too. Right.
Yeah. I think he definitely does.
Mm-hmm. So he asks. They walk away. He asks Yolk, "Where's Worth?" He's like, never mind. I can pretty much guess where he is. And he goes, any sign of movement other than Trooper Worth's bowels?
I love the ongoing fucking joke with Worth that he's just constantly shitting himself.
Yeah, and so then he, Worth says, Yolk says there isn't any, but Tunney has to look for himself. And so he sees like there's a wall of dry stone, and he sees spears behind it, a whole lot of them starting to show against the sky. He's like, no movement, right, Corporal? And Tunney responds like, nope, no movement. And then we switch over to our boy Brammer Dangor's perspective, his POV. And he's with General Jallenhorn's entire division, which has been reinforced by 2 regiments from Miderick's. And they're drawn up in parade ground order on the gentle slope of the grass and shingle that led down to the shallows. They face north towards the heroes, towards the enemies. And then Gors thinks to himself, we got that much right, at least.
And so, pointing in the right direction.
Yeah, so apparently this is a whole mass of soldiers. And then we also have some of Dogman's Northmen standing near the water's edge. And they're all kind of just gawping, as Joe describes it, gawping up towards this military multitude.
And, I have a quick note here as well. I've mentioned it before in other episodes and stuff like that, but I just think it's really cool how the Union kind of evolves over time with the way their army is set up, and he does this with the North as well, and I think it's pretty clever in a very natural way. But if we notice here, basically we've got the King's Own 8th Regiment, we've got the 5th Regiment, you've got the Dogsman's Men, there is the Rostard Regiment, what's left of them. He's got the Adwa Volunteers. which also shows the scale of which Adua's to the point where they can have a whole volunteer regiment just for their own group. And it's interesting how there's not just the King's Own, and they're not actually just levies anymore. They are their own regiments, and they do have levies, but it's kind of this in between state where they are not a fully professional army. They're still kind of partly, but they're no longer just like, okay, let's bring a whole bunch of shitty levies all at once. They have a different system where they are now supplying these regiments all the time, and they're not just going for one war. It also shows how the fact that the Union is in a constant state of like military mobilization as well, since they are constantly having to reinforce their men, which they did not really do in the first trilogy. They obviously probably did that because of Bethod, because they're like, damn, this guy's fucking us up. We're gonna lose the whole army out here. We gotta figure out a new logistical system. So I just like how that is a thing that Joe either purposefully or just naturally does on his own.
I wonder how much of that is Baez's influence. Since
Yeah,
obviously Baez wasn't really involved with anything in the first trilogy at all. Well, up until the last Argument of the Kings, anyway.
Yeah, it's hard to say, honestly, because it's like you could see how he would be more involved with everything, but at the same time, I don't think he cares about how the armies ran.
Yeah, but he cares if they win, though. And if they win and it's cheaper, that's even better.
And don't forget, Baez is, over the hundreds of years that he's been alive, part of his, I know at the very least one, if not more, has been the persona of a general, like Bialoveld, I think it was, or who was the other one? There was
no, he never played a general.
Well, no, he played somebody. I know there was Stolicus.
It was the Archlector. He wasn't Stolicus.
I said he's not. I said he wasn't.
He advised Stolicus, maybe.
Like maybe he advised Stolicus. No, I think Stolicus was actually under Juvens.
Stolicus under Juvens, under the Old Empire. Baez never took the role of military leader. He's obviously got a lot of experience. He's been in war.
Right, but I feel like there was another writer, and I think it turns out it was Baez. I think it was. I think there was.
No, you got Zoller, who was the Archlector.
He had Zoller, and then Bialoveld was his Lord Chamberlain. Was King Howard's Chamberlain. Okay. He also I had to look back at the original trilogy, but every single time he intervened, it was always on the government part of things. He's never been a general. That's not his.
Okay, maybe not a general, but he's obviously aware of how armies are ran, right?
Yeah, experience.
But more than anything, he knows how to supply logistics. He runs a bank.
Yeah.
He's good in that department.
So I can see. I'm just saying I could see a world or a situation where some point in time Baez was involved in maybe like the standard operating procedure or devising the quote unquote manual.
I don't necessarily mean like on a day-to-day basis. I just mean because he appoints people who I know that guy will do this way, and
he's more of a delegator.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, but I'm not saying down to the minutia. I'm saying like general overarching. I can see Baez being involved in that, and general like this is how they kind of should be structured. This is the success that I've seen in my hundreds of years of existing, like that kind of thing. I don't know. But I think
he also likes to let people fall on their face too, though.
He likes success more.
Not when it costs him. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do think you're right, Harrison, that it's very interesting to see the way that the armies have evolved over the course of the story.
And we've since we're already here, we've mentioned it before, but the Northmen are obviously hiring conscripting boys of Beck says he is a few years late and he's 17. So they're conscripting boys of 14, 15 years old. And a lot of them don't even have weapons and stuff like that. So the North is very, very stretched as well. But it's interesting to see, too, now that instead of it just being, all right, here's my army, we're going to administrate it, Black Dow has broken it up into like the clan. He's kind of hybridized the clan system that was being used before. His war chiefs are heads of different armies and things like that. It's not just like, I'm the head of the clan. He now has his generals, his war chiefs. They're just... they're not the same as what Bethod had going on. They were called war chiefs, but they are more of like his loyal men who he thinks he needs to be in charge. Whereas Black Dow is like trying to keep a regional balance going on as well. So,
yeah.
But they also they're paying their people now. which is very interesting. They're not just conscripts. Like they're not just what is that terminology, George? Like they're obviously being paid for their work now. I
They're
just
not being
don't know.
press gangs. They're
Yeah,
volunteering.
yeah. They're technically volunteering. It's just that they're so militaristic that they have all these volunteers from the young men and stuff from the songs and everything. But it is also like so interesting now that like I can't believe they're taxing us now. We have to pay for our army. Like
Well, that's all because of Bethod.
That's all because of Bethod. But it's interesting that Black Dow has kept that up because he understands the worth of that.
Right, and now that system's been ingrained because remember, Bethel was in power for some years, so like it's hard. Like what normally there are some things that would just go back to the old ways, which might have been like the clans and the chieftains kind of like breaking up and fighting against each other. But the system probably has worked,
Yes, and everybody recognized that. This is interesting to see how that aligns.
Yeah. So going back to this, General Jallenhorn is by the way, General Jallenhorn is wearing a work of art more than an actual piece of armor. His fucking breastplate and shit is engraved with golden suns and wreaths of oak and laurel and the most exquisite craftsmanship. And then he, because he's on his horsey and Gorse is on his horsey, and then he says, "Wish me luck," and he gallops. Sorry, he canters to the front of the ranks, and Gorse does wish him luck. And I know you guys really like this. I think George, you might want to let's talk about the speech that he gives to his men right here. Harrison and George.
Yeah, I think the main thing for me, is the fact that the speech that he's about to say, it comes from the heart. He's not just like a lot of the speeches in the First Law are, even cross speech. Like he's just trying to maneuver and try to get everybody to say what he thinks they want to hear, XYZ. Obviously Valamir didn't really have a speech, but he's just kind of like very formal, very corporate. But Jallenhorn, I think, in this speech, he has one of the best speeches because he actually is speaking from the heart, and he's actually trying to be like, guys, we have to do this because it's the right thing.
Takes the blame. Takes the
responsibility. And he says, "Men of the Union, 2 days ago, many of you were among those who suffered defeat at the hands of the Northmen, who were driven from the hill you see ahead of us. The fault of that day was entirely mine." And, all the way down the line, the men were repeating the speech. So unlike in a lot of different speeches we hear in the First Law, everybody's actually hearing the speech for once.
Yeah, that's true. I like that detail.
I hope and I trust that you will help me gain redemption today. Certainly, I feel great pride to be given such an honor of leading men like you, brave men of Midderland, Starrickland, Angland, and brave men of the Union. I like this part too because he mentions the different regions, and the different regions almost always forgotten about, even by Joe. And even Gorse is like, okay. He's like, this is actually kind of a good speech. He's kind of getting teary-eyed, and he's thinking about it, and
he's still sarcastic about it though. He's like,
he's
a jingoistic mystic of the eye.
Jallenhorn goes, "War is terrible, but war is wonderful. In war, a man can find out all he truly is, all he can be. War shows us the worst of men, their greed, their cowardice, their savagery, but it also shows us our best, our courage, our strength, our mercy. Show me your best today, and more than that, show it to the enemy."
And then everybody cheers. Even Gorse is cheering.
It's a good little speech. I think doesn't now. Correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen. I am super sure that Wes is the one who says, "In war, a man finds out who he truly is." That's just a callback.
I think it does come back to West.
I am about 90% sure.
Is it West? Is it West?
I'm
pretty sure.
Would have to check, but
yeah,
I'd have to double check, but I'm about 90% sure that it is West who says that in war a man finds out who he truly is. Not that it's not a common saying in general, but
it's interesting, especially considering another character that says that a lot later.
Yeah, it's said by other people as well, but I'm pretty sure Wes is the one. And I think that works out well. Obviously, Jallenhorn here is he has this connection. He's got a good speech here. He's speaking from the heart, and everything he says is very true. I think very true. He's not being ridiculous. He's being responsible. and he's saying the truth, but also still hyping up his boys. And it's exactly what they need, I think, because all they're doing is walking straight. I can imagine Croy having this conversation with Gjallarhorn. He's like, "Listen, all you have to do is go in a straight line. I won't let you down, Lord Marshal. I don't let you down. All I need you to do is go in a straight line. I'm going to lead from the front. You don't have to do that. I must."
I bet you he told Croy that he was gonna lead from the rear, but as soon as like they formed, he was like, "Fuck it, I'm leading from the front." That's hilarious.
And he is one of the only characters too who's like, "I'm leading from the front." Not that Gjallarhorn isn't terrified, but he's like, "I'm doing this shit."
Yeah, I want to get to that part. I mean, he goes, after he gives a speech, which is a good speech, he goes back to the men, Gorse and all them, and also where Dogman is. And it's the first time. It's not the first time. It's we haven't seen Dogman in a bit, but he's there, and he's like, "Good speech," as far as those things go. And Gjallarhorn thanks him, says that he just tried to simply tell the truth. And then Dogman's like, "Yeah, yeah." And he goes, "Oh, nice piece of armor there." Yeah. And then Gjallarhorn kind of just uncomfortable, but he kind of is like, "Yeah, it's a gift from the king. It just never seemed like the right occasion before." And so Dogman asks him, "What's the plan?" And Gjallarhorn just goes, he tells him all of the information, like, the 8th and the 13th Foot and the Starska regiment are going to lead.
Starxa.
Starxa. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
You got to say it this way, though.
Starxa. And then the 12th and Adwin Volunteers, and then the Rostad Regiment, and the 6th will follow in reserve. We're all just going to go in that direction. And Dogman's like, "Well, you got no shortage of bodies." And then, he says that first they're going to cross the shallows. He expects Black Dow to have skirmishers. And obviously some resistance through the orchards. And that's where Dogman says they might be able to flush them out of the trees. But Gjallarhorn goes like, "You got no more than like a few score men here." Dogman's like, "Well, there's more to war than numbers. Don't worry. A few of my boys are already across the river laying low. Just once you're over, just give us a chance. If we're able to shift them, fine. If not, you've lost nothing."
He literally said, "Let me cook, bro."
What happened?
he said, "Let me cook, man."
Yeah. Cook. And then Gjallarhorn goes, "Yeah, and eventually the goal is basically that we just climb the hill." And Dow's like, Dogman's like, "You climb the hill?" And he's like, "Uh-huh." And then Dogman just says, "Fuck." And then he goes, "Man, they've been up there for 2 days now. Dow's all kinds of things, but he's no fool. He'll be ready. Stakes planted, ditches dug, men at the walls." And then Gjallarhorn says their purpose isn't necessarily to drive them off, but it's to fix them in place while Miderick and Colonel Brock, on respectively the left and right, force openings on the flanks. And he goes, "But we hope to achieve more than that, maybe." And Dogman goes, "Yeah, I mean, fuck. You sure about this?" He goes, his opinion doesn't matter. It's the plan is Marshal Croy's on orders of the close council and the wishes of the king. His responsibility is the timing. So, all right, well, let's hopefully get going sooner rather than later. They're going to have rain, and it's going to be a lot of it, he thinks. And so, Dogman rides off to his men. And then he talks to himself, Gjallarhorn. He says, "The timing's in my hands. Across the river, through the orchard, straight up the hill. Just go north. That should be within my capabilities. I would have thought." Yeah.
So sad.
I know. And then he goes, "I very much wanted to do the right thing, but I have proved myself to be not the greatest tactical mind in His Majesty's army. At least I could still lead from the front." And then Gorse.
But I really love the fact that he knows that.
Yeah. No, he knows. He knows he's been propped up to a position higher than he's more equipped to. Better, than he's not equipped to be a fucking general.
Mm.
And then Gorse kind of just says, "Well, with the greatest respect, sir, I suggest you remain behind the lines." Gjallarhorn's like, "What?" And then he goes, "Your concern for my safety is touching, Colonel Gorse, but..." And then Gorse interrupts him and says, "Bremer." Tells him to call him by his name. And Gjallarhorn smiles and he goes, "Really touching, Bremer, but I can't consider it. His Majesty expects us, and then Gorse in his head thinks "fuck His Majesty," but he says out loud, "You are a good man, and war is no place for good men." Jallenhorn disagrees, says that war is a wonderful thing for redemption. If you smile in the face of danger, acquit yourself well, stand your ground, live or die, you are made new. Battle can make a man clean, can't it? Only look at you. I may or may not be a good man, but you are, without a doubt, a hero. And Bremer is like, what? Me? and then Jallenhorn's like, who else? 2 days ago, in these shallows, you charged the enemy alone and saved my division. I witnessed part of the action myself. And then yesterday, you were at the old bridge. You forced a crossing when Midderic's men were mired in the filth. A crossing that may very well win this battle for us today. You are an inspiration, Bremer. You prove that one man can still be worth something in the midst of all this. You do not need to fight here, yet you stand ready to give your life for king and for country. Heroes are a great deal rarer than good men. And then, Bremer Dangor says, they're quickly fashioned from the basest materials, quickly fashioned and quickly replaced. If I qualify, they are worthless. And then Jallenhorn says, well, I beg to differ. And Gore says, differ by all means, but please remain behind the lines. And Jallenhorn gives him a nice little pat on his shoulder, and he goes, your concern for my safety really is touching, Bremer, but he cannot do it. He cannot do it any more than you can. And Gore says, no, a shame.
I like Gorse. Sort of like this is a kind of a triumphant moment. Not a triumphant moment, but a sort of faux triumphant moment from Joe, as we always get. Like with all of the big speeches, I think, it's good. I really enjoy that particular section, and I like Gorse's reaction as well. He actually does speak to somebody for the first time, and he's surprised to think that people think better of him than he does of himself, which is interesting because he thinks everybody thinks like that. He thinks everybody's against him.
Well, he thinks everyone's against him. Maybe he thinks everyone has, not ulterior motives, but internally they probably have a viewpoint of like that guy with the squeaky voice, that kind of thing. Whereas Jallenhorn is being really authentic with him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Truly authentic. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's like he said in the very beginning, like he likes that he's not he's whenever he speaks to him, like you said, he's being authentic, and whenever Jallenhorn is like, oh, it's an honor, like Gorse doesn't want to admit it, but he knows that he's like, damn, thanks, bro.
Yeah.
Thanks, bro.
I like how Gorse as well here is like, it's like the reflection as well, like how he says how, oh well, you're the king's not gonna, in his mind he's like, the king's not gonna care, like this is dumb. But if only he again, Gorse doesn't understand Giselle because just how would care very deeply. And I think Jallenhorn knows, fundamentally knows Giselle better. Mm-hmm. And that's why in his mind, like, he feels like he owes him, and to every degree that he has to do. That's why he's so resolute in doing this, is one reason why. Because he knows that, and, Giselle's mind, that is the case. Also, since he brought up this breastplate thing, it is very sweet that Giselle, all his friends, he always makes these little gifts for them. They're always like these nice steels or this breastplate, or in the future I think he makes something for Brent, and it is it's sad because it's like that distant, it's like the your distant rich friend who you don't really understand, but he understands you, and so he buys stuff for you because he can't be there with you. It's so sad. It makes me so depressed whenever they talk about these gifts from the king. I'm like, no. Damn it.
Yeah, knowing what we know as well, and Giselle is, he can't get close to people, literally.
Yeah, it's
sad.
It's also great too to see how Gorse. We were talking about this before we started the podcast. How Gorse is like, well, not Gorse. Jallenhorn was like, look, you showed us that one man can change the tide of battle. Like, you're a hero, Gorse. You're a hero. Is beyond the fact that Gorse appreciates that more than he realizes. It's really cool to see how it's turned on its head. Like, of course, the one character in the whole story who is considered to like a hero to everyone else is like scum of the earth in his own mind. It's so very Joe-like. It's so very Joe-like. It probably has happened many times in history.
So we'll switch perspectives over to our boy Calder. He's looking through the eyeglass that Bethod used to own, and he asks Pale of Snow, who's right beside him. He's like, "Do you think they're ready?" He goes, "Yep, I can see a lot of horses." Calder goes, "You could see? I can't see shit." Because it's still dark. It's like it's barely dawn, if it is, right? It's like what was it? What's the thing called? False dawn, maybe I think it's called something like that. Anyway, he goes, "Do you
Not
think
heard
they're
that.
watching?" You never heard that? I think I've
No.
heard something like that. He goes, "Is Midoric watching? You think?" He goes, "I would be." He goes, "All right, well, I guess it's time." So he takes a drink from a flask. His bladder is aching. He gets on top of the wall, right? And he looks down at his men. They're all kind of just staring at him. And he goes, "Well, here we go." And he unlaces and he starts trying to piss, right? And he's hoping that, he knows there's a lot of people looking at him, all the 1,000 of his boys, and maybe some of Tenway's men as well, and the eyes of the thousands of Union cavalry up ahead. And he's hoping that General Midoric is among them, ready to pop his skull with anger. And he can't piss just yet. He's like, "God damn it!" And then he looks down, and there's a guy to his left, a grizzled old Carl, who's like watching his efforts with a puzzled expression. And Calder's, "Can you not look?" And the guy, "Sorry, Chief, sorry."
I like how it says that he almost daintily averted his eyes. Like,
And then Calder goes, "Maybe it was being called Chief that got on him over the hump." He felt that hit in the bladder, and he grinned, let it build, and then let his head drop back, looking at the sky, and just said, "Ah!" And there he pees. Piss is showering out, and it spatters all over the first flag, and then he goes, "Well, some for you too," and he patters over this. Just pisses over some of the second flag. And so
he's making a big show of it.
yeah, so he's pissing all over the flags that they have stole, the second and third standards, don't forget. And then men are cheering him on. And then, he's giving, whoop and everything. And he goes, "I would shit on them too, but I'm all stuck up from white eye stew." And then, a couple guy goes, "I'll shit on them." Some other guy, "Save it for the Union. You can shit on them when they get here." And the men are whooping and laughing and cheering. And some of the men even climbed up on the wall and started pissing for themselves, not on themselves. And they thought it'd be funnier, because they know what's about to come. He goes, "Well, at least he gave his father's men, his brother's men, his men a good laugh before they all got fucking murdered."
Oh,
Which I think this is a good thing, because we already know Midoric is apoplectic with rage, and now seeing this, like Tony said, he might explode and take half the valley with them.
Oh, I can see that. I love that's the second time that comes up in this chapter.
Well, it's Midoric's fault. He even said it in the chapters prior to this episode that he put the second and the third standards right where everyone could see him, like a flagrant, disrespectful display, right? Of like, we're right here, bitches.
And then didn't make sure anyone was on duty either.
Yeah, for real. So, yeah, this is great. And then we cut over to Beck's perspective, and he says he thinks he can hear laughter echoing in the wind, but he goes, "Who the fuck is laughing at this time? Jesus." And then you can see across the shallows, like, all those Union men. And he's like, "Fuck, there are thousands of them." And Weirin of Bleh is like, "I know. And the more there are, the more I glory, right, Crawl?" Crawl, who's chewing at his fingernails, goes, yeah, sure. I wish there were twice as many." And he's being sarcastic, but Weirin is like, "By the dead, so do I. But you never know. Maybe they got some out of sight." And I think that all these people are just like, what's the word? Not suffering.
He's having a mania.
No. Like everyone else is kind of just like putting up with this shit. What's the word for it? They're humoring him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because John Leon goes, "Yeah, we can only hope." And then Weirin just kind of goes, "I fucking love war. I fucking love it, don't you? The smell of it, the feel of it. War is honest. There's no lying to it. You don't have to say sorry here. You don't have to hide. You cannot. If you die, so what? You die among friends, among worthy foes. You die looking the great leveler in the eye. If you live, well, lad, that's living, isn't it? A man isn't truly alive until he's facing death. I love war. Just a shame that Ironhead's down there and the children, because maybe Ironhead can hold them off, right? Because Ironhead, he's an implacable foe, you could say. And then he asked Crawl, do you reckon that they'll get all the way up here? Crawl couldn't say. And he goes, Wyvern goes, I reckon they will. I hope they will. Better come before the rain starts, though. That sky looks like witches' work, isn't it? Huh? Oh, bloody hell, I can't wait. Oh, geez. And then Beck mutters, he goes, aren't they people too, just like us? And then Wyvern looks at him and goes, more than likely they are. But if you start thinking like that, well, you'll get no one killed at all.
Jesus.
What the fuck is Beck supposed to say to that?
Oh, I really fucking hate Wyvern at this point,
Yeah.
I feel like everybody else does. It's like, yeah, he's really useful in a fight, but fucking hell, does he chance from shit?
And Crawl says it. He goes, well, it's easy for you to say. Shoglig told you the time and place of your death that it isn't here. And he goes, well, that's true. And I admit it's a help to my courage. But if she told me here and she told me now, do you really reckon that'd make any difference? And Wonderful might be like, well, you might not be yapping about it so bloody loud. And then Wyvern goes, oh, look, they're already off. That's early. And he's talking about the men up to the west across the old bridge. Look at the pretty horses. He couldn't see much, but he could see that there's the cavalry is off. And Wyvern goes, that's cheeky of them. Getting started. It's hardly dawn. And Crawl notes that it's too dark for riding, but they must be pretty eager. So they must mean business today. Oh, there'll be some songs sung about today. And Wonderful just kind of says, I dare say, some folk will sing about any old shit. So that's the end of that chapter, boys. Go ahead. Give me your ratings. Give me your thoughts.
I fucking love this chapter. I'm going to give it an 8 right off the bat there.
Mm-hmm.
It's full of speeches. There's like 3 speeches.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all really good for different reasons. And we get, obviously, there's just so much about it. And just the fact that this is just setting stuff up, but getting in the zone, getting in. Joe really prepares you for his fight scenes, doesn't he, in this way sometimes?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, I think so.
I reckon an 8.
I'm moving at 8 as well, because it's kind of like naturally in the battle, right? This is like, right, you could say it's a calm before the storm, but I feel like this is like some of the peak part of the book. It's like the climax. It's part of the climax, because we're getting all of these characters who are becoming self-realized and dealing with a whole bunch of stuff and having their moment. It's all centered around war, their own views of war, how they're dealing with the cost of it. You get almost everybody's perspective on how they're going to deal with this battle and how they view war. And I think it's such a fascinating, like if you're gonna learn about war in general, I feel like just reading this chapter would provide you with so much context and detail about how people view it in different ways depending on who they are and stuff. And I really like that a lot. So I think 8 out of 9 is still justifiable, and got some of the best speeches in this whole series, and it's got some of the best views without it being like you can get really corny with this stuff, and Joe has built it up in a way that it's not. So I really like it a lot for that reason.
Yeah, I have to agree. It's a great chapter. You said we got the speeches or attempts to raise the spirits of the men. And in Calder's case, the attempt to piss off Midoric even more to the point where he becomes a supernova. We have, the Jallenhorn and Gorse, their dynamic. We see that, fleshed out in a very humane way. And Gorse trying to put Jallenhorn out of harm's way. And Jallenhorn seems pretty determined to prove himself, alive or dead. We see Craw trying to meld being his usual straight edge self while also being a hard ass, as only Dow's men could follow. We see kind of just like, I think Harrison, you said it, the calm before the storm, those quiet moments, and and we see that personified in some of our favorite characters here. And so, not much more to talk about it as opposed to what you guys already covered. I am going to give this an 8 out of 9 fingers. We're getting the goddamn trifecta.
Yeah.
So it's a great, great, great chapter. Love it all. Weirin's goofiness aside, and Beck's kind of just like, what the fuck is happening here? Oh, man. So we'll move on to our next segment, which is our character spot. Boys, who are we spotlighting today?
Well, we know he's got a little bit more time in the sun, but we must commemorate Gjallarhorn. He's been around for a while, and he was in the first trilogy. He's always been a good man and a excellent lieutenant, a mediocre captain. The whole shebang.
And a good friend as well.
And a good friend.
And a decent man.
A decent man. And he is. I really like how he is really going for what we've kind of already spoken about, which is he is trying to reclaim his honor, which is a silly thing. But whenever it is done right, with genuine authenticity, which he is doing, it really kind of breaks your heart. And it is. I think he's come a long ways. He's, even though he hasn't really grown as a commander, he's obviously not the same man that he used to be. He's trying to be better, and not very many characters do that in the First Law. And just respect the hell out of him. He also, we'll mention it again here soon, but he's actually kind of a badass for whatever reason. he's kind of a sleeper build, and it's something. He's got one of those very rare personalities and characters inside of a grimdark story that just make you feel pretty good and sad in a tragic way that you don't normally feel in a lot of stories. So I really like Gjallarhorn a lot. We liked him in the first. He's even among our friend group. He's also created this sound effect that we do all the time inside the first trilogy. Which was whenever he's talking about inside the audiobook, whenever they're talking about Eris or whatever, they're like, "Oh, Eris, yeah, she's got money, and man, ooh, whoa." He's great. He's great, and it's so cool that Joe always carries these characters through like the previous stories. We're starting to see the fruits of that now, where we're seeing these old characters return, and I think the dynamic and how they act with each other and time changes them. He does it so well. So that's what I have to say about Gjallarhorn, gentlemen.
I mean, you're absolutely right, and it'd be so easy to see Gjallarhorn as the buffoon that he is presented as.
Yeah.
But it's just the fact that he's so self-aware. He's just like, I don't even know why I'm here. Like, I just got promoted one day because the king's my mate. And I'm just like, I have no idea what I'm fucking doing. But he's not overblown. He hasn't got a big head like every other fucking character in this book.
Yeah.
No, you're right. Yeah, and looking at it from the original trilogy, he was always the jovial friend. Well, him and Caspa, right? They're always like cracking jokes and everything. But he's obviously he's probably feeling like he definitely feels imposter syndrome, right? Like, let's not forget, he wasn't part of the battle to come there, right? With West sent him off to get reinforcements. He survives. Caspa dies. He sees West get promoted, but then Giselle promotes him after West dies as well. So you can imagine that Gjallarhorn probably feels like not only survivor's guilt, but also like the idea of that he has to live up to these men that died. They gave their lives to the Union, and he probably doesn't think he's as good as them, especially West. And so he's always competing and striving when he knows that he should never been promoted past lieutenant, I think it was. That would have been the best kind of thing for him, best position. At least not so quickly, because in order to get promoted, if you're
you need to learn. You need to learn. It's not his fault at all. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So Giselle and doing him
I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to say no?
Right.
No, actually, I'm all right. Thank you.
No, right. But, in Giselle trying to hook his friends up with the best positions possible, he actually did Gjallarhorn disservice. And Gjallarhorn isn't going to see it that way. He kind of does, but he probably is trying to live up to some ideal and realizes that he's failed in more ways than he can. And honestly, with this mindset, it shows the mindset you should have. But he hasn't learned enough. He hasn't proven himself, and he's gonna try his best here. So, General Dallenhorn, we salute thee.
Whoa.
Whoa. So rich, so much money.
Aw.
Yeah.
That's so dumb.
So we'll move on to our final segment, which is our third and final chapter read through. This is the Riddle of the Ground, and now we're back in Calder's perspective. And Pale of Snow says, "Oh, here they come," and they can see him far off that the cavalry are starting to charge. Can't believe they fell for it. Pale Snow says, "Well, if you can rely on one thing in battle, is that men rarely do what's sensible." And that's what made your father a great man. Always kept a cold head, even in the fire. And in this case, in our closest similar saying would be a cool head. So he goes, "All right, yeah, great." And Pale Snow's like, "Are you gonna keep a cold head?" He's like, "Yeah, I don't see why not, or I don't see why." So he sees that the ground ahead is actually perfect for the cavalry because it's just flat, right? It's just prime cavalry charging ground. And the funny irony here is that it was because of Bethod was the one that smoothed off this ground, to pull up the hedgerows, fill in the ditches so there could be more crops grown and taxes paid and soldiers fed. It's a nice golden carpet of welcome for the Union cavalry. So he goes, "Fuck." Well, he's thinking to himself. He's thinking about Seth. He's thinking about the unborn baby, wishing that he could live to kiss his first child. And as he sees the cavalry charging towards them. And then Wide Eye goes, "Maybe some arrows?" And he's, yes, arrows. And then Wide Eye roars the order. So that way it looks like Calder gave it himself. And they shoot off the arrows. Hit some men, but they're still coming, right? And he kind of finds himself edging backwards slightly despite himself. And he goes, "Jesus Christ, to stand against that was mad." But he realized also something was that he is finding himself less afraid with every moment and more excited. Because all his life, he's always been dodging something like this, right? Always coming up with excuses. And now he's facing it. He has to face it. And finding that it's not so terrible as he always was, thought it might be. And so he's almost smiling, almost laughing at him leading Carls into battle. And then he's just, so out of nowhere, he's just like standing, spreading his arms, roaring at nothing, welcoming the cavalry. And then they started coming faster and faster and faster. And so he started thinking about like how he wished that he could use the ground like his father would have, because his father obviously knew how to use each inch of the ground to the best of his army's ability, right? Where to place what men, where to strike, all that kind of stuff. So, but he knows that he never paid attention to those kind of lessons. So he did what he's always done best last night. He cheated. And so when the horsemen got closer, the cavalry, they didn't see the first pit. It's too dark still, and with those crops, it was a shallow trench, foot deep and foot wide, zigzagging through the barley. And most of them went clean over it without noticing. But a couple of unlucky ones got caught in it, and they went down hard. And then when one went down, more went down behind because they were caught up in the wreck. Mm-hmm. Then there was a second pit behind that one, second pit, and it was twice as wide and twice as deep. And so more horses fell in that one, snatching, as the front rank started plowing into it. And order started crumbling in their eagerness to get to the enemy. And then some kept plunging onwards. And then there was another pit, the biggest of all. It was two of them, actually, straight as a Northman could dig by darkness and angling roughly inwards, funneling the men towards both sides, both sides towards a gap in the center where the precious flags were set. So he's got a set of different trenches, different pits, dug in at different intervals, different sizes to just fuck up the cavalry charge, to stop their momentum, you could say.
Exactly. And you know how I love my earthworks, Jeffrey.
Huh?
You know how I love my earthworks. You got to have earthworks.
Yeah. You talk
dig
about
ditches.
Oh, World War One. What a wonderful time.
It's ingrained in us now. No, all the way throughout history, you gotta fucking dig ditches. That's all. That's like half of being a soldier. Is just digging. So it's interesting to see Calder's excellent tactics. And
Smart enough. Mm-hmm.
I like how he's not doing what his father would have done. And he's coming up with something new, something that's his own entirely.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think his father would have done in his position? I would think maybe something similar, or
That's why one had fucked up in the first place. That's the
that's
truth.
true. Right. In the first place, he would have been. This wouldn't be happening. This whole battle. You're right. Well, yeah, and he is smart enough to know that he can't just dig ditches, right? Because they're gonna charge orderly, in an orderly fashion.
Well,
However,
that's why he took the flags and pissed him off.
and pistol. Yep, exactly. So he just knows because he remembers what was said about Minarik. Skilled, competent, but reckless and vain.
Yeah, I like how
Quick
he
to
also
anger.
gets that impression off the order that he intercepts as well.
My
He's
men
just
are
like,
giving her all.
The guy sounds like an insufferable fuck.
Yeah, and so you see the effects of this now, and then there are still men, horses plunging towards them because the ditches aren't going to get everybody, but they are going to slow them down and hurt them enough where they can have a chance, right? So that's where then as they're getting closer, Pale Snow yells out spears. Calder's like, yeah, good idea, and then Pale and Snow's picked men. They get their war cry going. They have their spears. They lower their spears, and the horses they clash. Boom, and Calder's in the midst of this, and it's a crazy chorus of shrieking, steel, and murdered men, spear shafts bent and shattered, and Calder's again caught in the midst of it. He's coughing, and his sword is just dangling from his lip hand. He's like, "What the fuck? What kind of all these like strange happenstances that have occurred to have allowed this to happen, and what might be able to get him out of it alive?" And that's the end of the chapter. Boys, how do you rate it?
I'm going to give this one a high one as well. I absolutely love Calder. Like at this point, he's actually one of my favorite and most likable characters, despite the fact he's a piece of shit and he killed Forley the weakest.
Forley!
Forley. Yeah, that's probably one of the greatest.
You shut up, Harrison, or else I'm gonna murder you where you sleep when we go to Oklahoma.
Just seeing Calder come into his own and do something that's for him, and even at the end, he's just like, "What the fuck is still going on? I don't know." I love it. I think it's brilliant. And we give it an 8.
I do like it a lot, but it is also really short, so I'm going to give it a 7. Same reasons, though. It's really cool to see this event happen where it's like, oh yeah, some tactics. Let's go.
Yeah.
Not just as much as we love like it's so chaotic. I don't know what's going on. It's also a bit silly sometimes, because you're like, come on, there is tactics and things to be done in battle, and so that's done here, and I think it's really cool that how it happened. So
Yeah.
yes.
I really like the chapter, but it is short, and I'll give it a 6 and a knuckle. I really like it. It's good, but it's very short, and we're in one position, we're in one location, one POV, and we kind of figured what was happening. We kind of figured that he stole those flags for a reason. It's to piss him off, and he goes, "Oh well, the added element is he has to go pee." Well, that was earlier, and then now he's getting the results of that bit of showmanship. So I enjoy it, but short chapter, 6 and a knuckle for me. Well, that's our show, everyone. We want to thank you all for listening and supporting this podcast. As you know, this is a passion project for the three of us, and your support means so much to us.
Join us next week as we cover Onward. Man, it's a weird one. Yeah.
Onward and upward.
Join us next week as we cover Onwards and Upwards, More Tricks, and The Tyranny of Distance.
And make sure you follow us on all of our social media. Have a look at the website and shoot us an email at circleoftheworldpodcast@gmail.com.
And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. And please make sure to rate and review us. Thank you all again for listening.
I fucking love war!